US envoy George Mitchell fails to push Binyamin Netanyahu into an agreement over settlements. Where does that leave President Obama's peace initiative? And is the US willing to force its ally to compromise? This is Inside Story. Hello there, I'm Shuli Ghosh. So, more talks, but ultimately fruitless. There's still no agreement to freeze Israeli settlement construction. The US envoy to the Middle East, George Mitchell, has met with Israeli Prime Minister Binyamin Netanyahu during his latest tour of the region.
We extend our hands to the United States and to the Palestinians.
Although the meeting was described as good by the Prime Minister's office, there was no deal on the thorny issue of settlements. The US wants Israel to temporarily halt its expansion into Palestinian land, especially in the occupied West Bank. Mitchell and Netanyahu will meet again on Friday. The special envoy wants to secure an agreement ahead of possible three-way talks between Netanyahu, US President Barack Obama and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. So let's discuss the issues. Joining us today are our guests in Tel Aviv, Raanan Gisson, former senior advisor to Ariel Sharon. In Washington, D.C., Michael Hudson, professor of international relations at Georgetown University. And in London, Azam Tamimi, director of the Institute of Islamic Political Thought. Thanks very much indeed to all three of you for joining us today. So let me start with you, Michael. Just how realistic was it that Mitchell would be able to get an agreement from Netanyahu at this point?
Well, I think the way it looks from here in Washington now is that Netanyahu is playing for time, and so far I think quite successfully, hoping, I think, that the Obama administration will be sufficiently preoccupied with the other major domestic issues here in the United States that he will not give the kind of muscular push that I think would clearly be necessary to move the Israelis toward a definitive freeze on settlement expansion.
Obama's got a lot riding on this, though. Do you think that the Americans will up the ante at the next meeting on Friday?
Well, I think it's possible. One of the interesting factors here is that I think the Israeli lobby, headed by an organization called AIPAC, is actually now being challenged to some extent by an alternative pro-Israeli but rather more liberal lobby called J Street. And so I think the administration knows that the formerly kind of ironclad and quite fearsome support that the Friends of Israel could mobilize is cracking a little bit. But whether that will translate into an actual decision by Obama to put some real pressure on Netanyahu still remains to be seen.
Raanan, let me ask you what the feeling is from Tel Aviv. Is there a perception that there is increasing pressure coming to bear on Netanyahu over this issue of settlements? And does Netanyahu look as though he could find some kind of compromise?
Yeah, well, I think we're now in the final lap, so to speak, you know, like in a relay, and everybody's trying to get a better position before the deadline. I mean, there's a common interest on all sides. I say Palestinian, Israelis, and the Obama administration to come to the UN General Assembly with some sort of formula that could serve as a restart of the process, a meeting between Obama and Abu Mazen and Netanyahu, because it is important to all parties for other reason, not just the immediate reason of what is happening in the region, to come up with some sort of an understanding and to start a political process. So the last word has not yet been said. I would be patiently waiting for Friday to see what will happen. You know, Henry Kissinger once said that Israel has only domestic politics, and it is domestic politics that is playing the most prominent role right now. And I think Netanyahu is trying to shore up the forces inside his coalition and outside, let's say, the president of Israel and other forces in order to reach an agreement.
But I mean, when we look at the language
some formula
of what's being used,
of not a complete freeze, but something that could satisfy the United States,
yes,
and could later be sold to...
That's what I wanted to ask you, because about the language of what Netanyahu might be looking at, because we're not talking about a total freeze here. We're talking about cutting down on construction work and for a certain length of time.
Yeah, I think what is at issue now and what will have to be decided in the next few days, Friday or maybe early next week, is the scope and extent of what you call a freeze or stopping of construction. It is clear that it cannot be a total freeze. It is clear that previous understandings and previous agreements of Israel to remove unauthorized outposts, that will have to take place. And Israel, I think, will be, and I think on that issue, Netanyahu is clear. It is not clear on the extent exactly where there will be a freeze. For example, in the big settlement blocks, which, according to the 2004 letter of understanding between Bush and Prime Minister Sharon, these, in any future agreement, these blocks of settlements where there is a Jewish majority will remain in Israeli hands. So therefore, there to make a complete stoppage of construction and not to fall back to the agreement would be something that Netanyahu could not pass.
Okay, let me bring Azam in here, because I want to ask Azam, would anything less than a total freeze be acceptable to the Palestinians?
Well, it depends on which Palestinians you're talking to. I mean, if you're talking to Abbas and his group, they probably accept very little. But I think to the majority of the Palestinians, it's very disappointing that the conflict has been so minimized or has been brought down to the issue of settlements and the freeze of settlement growth. All these settlements are supposed to be illegal even by the standards of international law. Israel occupied the West Bank in 1967 and the Oslo peace process was supposed to be working for an end of Israeli occupation throughout the West Bank. But now what the Israelis are doing, actually, they are blackmailing everybody. They're blackmailing the Barack Obama administration. They're blackmailing the Palestinians.
What do you mean blackmailing, Azam? How are they blackmailing Obama's administration?
Well, they're turning the issue into the issue of whether they increase settlement growth or not, or freeze it for a bit, and what might convince them to do this very little bit that the Americans are asking them to do. They're asking the Arabs to normalize relations. They're asking the Palestinians to make more concessions. They're probably asking much more from the Americans and their European allies. It's the same sort of mindset that the Israelis have had since they occupied Palestine in 1948.
Okay, well, let's just remind our viewers about the issue over settlement activity and how it's escalated. This is the region before the 1967 Arab-Israeli War. Now, if you fast forward 40 years, over 450,000 Israelis had made their homes in the occupied West Bank by 2007. Now, that year, the then Prime Minister Ehud Olmert signed the Annapolis Agreement, promising to freeze settlement building. Since then, the number of Israeli settlers in the occupied land has grown to over 500,000. That's an increase of almost 10% in just 2 years. But the Israeli government says it's not building new settlements. It's simply allowing for natural growth. Michael, the reality is that Binyamin Netanyahu has to negotiate with his own fragile, tricky right-wing government. So he can't be as flexible as he might want to be.
Well, I must say it's a little bit hard to feel sorry for Mr. Netanyahu and his political problems. All of these leaders have political problems, but it seems to me that if what Mr. Gisson was saying earlier is correct, and I think he said it is clear that there can be no complete freeze on settlements, you can see how oddly skewed this debate has become, because of course I think everybody knows that the fundamental issue is not freezing of existing settlements or outposts. It's really the question of dismantling settlements. And so while Abbas, as Azam was mentioning, might be willing to accept anything he can get because his position is so weak, and I think he's so widely discredited as a Palestinian leader, one wonders whether from the other Arab states that are involved, whether they are really serious when they say, as the Saudis have said very clearly, we are not going to make any concessions along the way until we know that there is a complete freeze with something better to come down the road. Now, Obama has already blinked on this, and he offered, I think, a one-year settlement freeze a couple of months ago. And as I was saying earlier, it's a question whether he is willing to kind of let this slide, because it seems to me when you look at the fundamentals of this issue, which is all about occupation and settlements really, if we're just debating on the very margins about a partial freeze of certain increased outposts, etc., and natural growth that may be not so natural, this is not going to fly, I think, in the long run, and Obama is facing, I think, a major humiliation unless he cranks up the pressure.
Assam, this issue that you're talking about, Arab cooperation with Israeli states, at the moment there is a lack of enthusiasm from countries like Saudi Arabia and Egypt to normalise relations with Israel. Shouldn't they be doing their part as well if we want to see progress here?
Well, the Arabs did come up with an initiative now known the Arab Initiative, which was originally Saudi. And I think that that's the minimum the Arabs can go along with. They offered to recognize Israel and normalize relations with it in exchange for a total withdrawal from the areas occupied in 1967. And that is a major concession as far as the Palestinians are concerned. I mean, the mood in the Arab world is utter disappointment nowadays, because the Obama administration seems totally helpless. Rather than come with a fresh idea, all the Obama administration is trying to do is batch up a process which is heavily flawed and which Sharon declared dead a long time ago.
But what about President Obama's avowed intention to reach out to the Arab world? He's also using issues like Iran as a bargaining chip with Israel. Doesn't that show that he is actually taking things in a different direction from his predecessors?
Well, he gave a very beautiful speech in Cairo, but little is seen on the ground as far as policy is concerned. I think the Obama administration would want the Arabs to rally behind it when it comes to confronting Iran, but when it comes to the rights of the Palestinians, the Obama administration continues to impose sanctions on Gaza, to outlaw Hamas, which is a major constituent of the Palestinians, a major representative of the Palestinians. So there is really nothing new as far as the Palestinian issue is concerned.
Ranan, Azam there is saying that the Israelis have no intention of doing anything over settlements. In fact, they're using it to deflect from greater issues like Jerusalem, like refugees. What evidence is there that they're willing to reach some kind of solution?
These are very important issues, but the point is Obama has made a change in his approach, because he's talking about a regional peace. He's talking about the fact that all these local problems, Israeli, Palestinian, Jerusalem, territories, freeze on settlements, have wide, far-reaching implication for the entire region. And if the United States wants to move the region to a different plateau, I'd say, to stability, to peace, it has to be a piecemeal approach. Nothing in the Middle East, not just between Israel and its Arab neighbors, but between Arab countries themselves. See, the relation between Iraq and Syria can be finalized in one meeting where one side, says, I'm giving in, and the other side says, well, okay, I got it, and you have a permanent solution.
Only last week, Ehud Barak approved another 450 building permits in the West Bank. That gives the Arab states a powerful reason to say, no, we're not going to do anything because you're not doing anything.
Right. These 450, by the way, 450 approvals were already withheld before they were approved, withheld, and now they're reapproved in order to, I would say, and by the way, it's within the major
building blocks. Yes, but Ranan, it's the look of the thing, as you know what I'm saying.
I know. Yeah. I know. The look of the things is important. The aspect of public diplomacy is very important. But at the same time, I think all parties understand that in the final analysis, that the last day before the General Assembly meets, there is no other option but to start the political process, and everyone will have to give in a little bit. Right now, I would say I wouldn't jump to conclusions that this is dead, that nothing would happen, because I think the interest of all parties concerned is to come to the General Assembly with some beginning of a process, which is important, I would say, regionally, because everybody has to meet with the Iranian threat come October 1st or afterwards. And as a result of that, I think there has to be concession on both sides.
Michael, what are you saying?
No. I really disagree. I think this is a highly tendentiously optimistic analysis that we're hearing. There is no process right now, and the reason there isn't a process is that Netanyahu is stonewalling Obama. I thought it was interesting and a little bit hopeful that within hours of this announcement of the 450 new permits, the U.S. government came out very categorically and sharply saying, no, no, that's not what we mean at all. But I think the question is whether Obama is really ready to, to put into action what he means. He knows, and his advisors know, as Mr. Gisson rightly said, that everything is related to everything else in this region. But if you have nothing going on the Palestinian-Israeli issue, things are going to be bad everywhere else, from Iran to Iraq to Afghanistan. So if he's really serious about trying to uplift the whole region to a new plateau, then he really needs to, put the screws to Netanyahu. And maybe the best thing would be at the UN, why have a meeting? They're just kind of spitting in our eye. What we really need maybe is for Obama not to meet Netanyahu, to shun him, maybe have a private meeting with Abbas and with the other Palestinian representatives and Arab representatives to show that he is really displeased with this deliberate foot dragging that is quite obvious.
Let me read something which Israeli Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman said on Tuesday. He said that the Palestinian Authority was simply using the issue of settlements as an excuse to avoid direct talks. He said everybody who tries to use settlements as an obstacle for any comprehensive solution tries to cheat public opinion and tries to avoid any peaceful approach to the problems. Azam, why won't the Palestinians talk to the Israelis, even if there isn't some kind of comprehensive solution on settlements? Because there are so many issues to sort out.
Yeah, but the settlements are causing daily pain to the Palestinians. These settlements are built on the land stolen from the Palestinians, who are a few hundred meters away watching with agony what these settlers are doing to their land. These settlers who were brought from Europe and the rest of the world.
But there's so much at stake here, Azam. Do you think the Palestinians now worry that Washington is going to put pressure on Mahmoud Abbas to resume negotiations without any commitments on settlements?
That's possible, of course, because Mahmoud Abbas is in the mood of making concessions. He's already made too many concessions. Mahmoud Abbas is today involved in partnership with the United States of America and Israel in the West Bank, cracking down on Palestinian groups that are opposed to him, at arresting people, detaining them, torturing them, closing down institutions. The United States of America needs to start afresh. The United States of America needs to go back to the Mecca Agreement to see how first the Palestinian home can be improved in order for the Palestinians to be in a better position to decide where to go from here.
Well, let's talk about that. What are Obama's options? Michael, you were talking there about Obama should shun the Israelis. Possibly not something that's likely to happen. What about using trade deals as a form of incentive? Israel expects huge discounts on defence deals, which are worth billions. Couldn't the US negotiate over those? Use that as some kind of leverage?
Well, yes, I think there's a whole range of activities. The U.S.-Israeli relationship is multiple. There are trade, there are finance, there are commercial, all kinds of relationships, cultural relationships. And in a way, I think the best way to approach this for Obama would not be to pound his shoe, but simply to slow down on all of these little connections. Slow down on your intelligence relationship. Put some obstacles and delays into trade deals that may be forthcoming. Be tepid on new aid for Israel instead of enthusiastic, and so on. It's not easy, and I suspect you're right. I think that probably there will be a meeting at the General Assembly, because in the U.S., Obama does have a very, very serious political issue here. At the last meeting of AIPAC, the Israel Lobby Group here in Washington in May, I think it was well over half or 2/3 of the members of the House and the Senate actually attended this meeting. That's a strong signal that he doesn't have, complete freedom here. But if he really means what he says, and I think his analysis of the regional situation is absolutely right, and the Palestinian-Israeli issue is absolutely central, then he's got to do something.
Ronan, what do you think?
It doesn't make it.
Yeah, I think we got to put things in the proper perspective. Historically, no process in the Middle East was achieved by one bang, by a big bang. You know, it was always an incremental process of step by step. Remember the Kissinger approach, and that brought some results. Now, the other thing is today the relationship between the United States and Israel involves much more in scope and in depth than just the Palestinian-Israeli issue. There's strategic cooperation, there's the Iranian issues, there's the fight against global terrorism. I don't think putting pressure on Israel at this point, and I think that's the common understanding among the administration, at least to my understanding, would bring about a softening of Israeli position. On the contrary, I think it would harden the positions of the hardliners. I think it would give Iranian maybe the excuse to move forward and try to torpedo this whole process, because if this process succeeds, Iran will be isolated. So I think we have to look a little further, and I think that's what Obama is trying to do. And I believe that Netanyahu can come about with some sort of a formula that will be acceptable to Obama, but also to the Palestinians. Perhaps would not satisfy the need for a permanent agreement, but at least would enable to restart the process. And I think all parties have to think about restarting the process and forget about past incriminations and what one did, what one did not do. We have to move ahead because of other, as I said, regional issues which affect the well-being, stability, not just of Israel, but of the entire region.
Azam, Ranan saying that we have to move ahead. Sorry, Michael, go on.
Okay. Okay, I just wanted to know if it sounds like we're being asked to be blackmailed by Israel. Israel is a nuclear power. Israel is basically threatening to misbehave. If we don't be nice to Israel, Israel will throw a tantrum and create all sorts of problems for us. Should the United States really give into this kind of blackmail?
No, it's not blackmail. It's reciprocal relations. Each side benefits from that relation. Otherwise, it wouldn't have existed and wouldn't have evolved over the past 20 years. Come on. Israel does not blackmail.
Let me ask Azam, if there is no progress here with President Obama at the helm, putting his neck on the line, saying there should be progress, this is the Middle East peace process is going to be what I am striving to achieve. If he doesn't achieve anything, how far will his credibility be shot amongst the Arab states?
He's already losing his credibility because in the beginning he said he wanted to do things differently. What I said earlier, and I repeat again, is that he is not really doing anything new. His approach is to patch up this Oslo process, or what remains of it, although it hasn't worked. It's already 16 years since Oslo was signed, and the Israelis continue to make life difficult for their Palestinian partners in peace, including Yasser Arafat, and now even to the more lenient Mahmoud Abbas. And therefore, it's not going to work. The United States of America needs to have an entirely fresh look at things. Israel is the cause of the failure of this process, and now there is a new Palestinian reality. The Americans have to recognize it. Hamas today is the legitimate leader of the Palestinian people, and nothing will work if Hamas is not involved.
OK, an interesting mix of views there. Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen. We have to leave it there. Ranan Gisson in Tel Aviv, Michael Hudson in Washington, D.C. and Azam Tamimi in London. Thank you very much indeed for your time. And thank you for joining us here on Inside Story. We welcome your comments and suggestions, so please email us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. From me, Shuli Ghosh, see you next time.